On today's episode, I have a really special guest. She's Nimisha Morkonda, who has 14 years working with behemoths like Western Digital, SanDisk, Eli Lilly, etc. She has an undergrad degree in AI and master's degree specializing in data science. She also serves as an advisory board member in the strategic AI program at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs and actively participates as a judge in various university and school district science fairs in technology. A very warm welcome to the show, Nimisha.
Thank you, Kaushik. Happy to be here.
I'd like to start by asking you a difficult question. Most people think that AI just connects to all data sources and then magically does everything. I've been into the business intelligence and data warehousing space. You are the director of data science and analytics. So you'd be the right person to ask, how old is AI really?
Yeah, you're really kicking off with history, right? History is very important in my perspective. So, actually, AI has been around for way longer than most people realize. The term artificial intelligence itself goes back to like 1950s. It was coined by John McCarthy. He and Marvin Minsky, for people in the AI field, know that they are considered as fathers of AI. So in the 1950s is when John McCarthy really coined it. And it was around the same time they started what today we see as MIT's AI lab. So that's the earliest reference of artificial intelligence itself. Another parallel reference, again, this I don't know how many people know, but there is sci-fi writer Asimov, and he actually wrote a book called I, Robot in again around the same time, 1950s. And he talks
Mhm.
about fundamental laws of robotics, and a lot of the ethical AI that we talk about today is actually inspired. If you go back and read the book, it's a futuristic view. If you think about that, it was written in 1950s, but a lot of the things that he talks about is very applicable today, and a lot of the ethical things that we talk about is inspired by what he has written as a fiction, obviously.
Is this the Will Smith movie?
Yes, so they do have some references of it. Yes, that's a good correlation to make. Yeah. But I think there is a lot of additive fiction in the movie, but it's very well relatable for sure. And the other interesting thing about history in AI is prosthetics. It's been actually around as early as I think 15th century, where they targeted to build it for war veterans. The Greeks, the Egyptians had what they call as a capula leg. And no, sorry, that was Romans. And the Egyptians had artificial toe. And this is all we're talking about 15th century, right? So the idea of using prosthetics has been around for a very long time. And the concept has been there. And that kind of also translates to wanting to understand how brain works, right? Because that's where the idea of controlling prosthetics with human brain signals comes into picture. And if you go back to where the research on understanding human brain signals started, it's in the early 1900s. So it's not a new field like most people think. And long story short, the research has been happening for a very long time. And what really appears to be like an overnight transformation to most people in the last few years is really work of scientists for decades. It's just that now we are seeing an accumulation of all these efforts over time, and there's been failures in the middle as well, but success is what most people celebrate. And that's what gets more talked about a lot. So I think that's why it feels, oh, it's just a sudden new field that popped up out of nowhere.
Very interesting. I'm a huge proponent of AI. I use AI extensively, but I'm seeing this new trend, which is like a wild hype that exists around AI. Right? So you go to
Mhm.
the VCs, and as soon as you use the word AI in your pitch, you immediately get shortlisted to the screening round. So what's your view around this whole hype that's happening around AI?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I've had the similar observation. AI is a pretty complex field. It has components from various subfields, and just like any field, it comes with its own challenges. I think the most misunderstood idea, in my view, is that people think it's like a magic that can solve any problem and it can create a product out of the blue. In some sense, ChatGPT and what we see with Sora, those are setting, I don't know, I know it wasn't their intention, but I think it's setting a wrong precedence to people that AI is magic. What people don't realize is that What was built today as ChatGPT is built over learnings from several decades of failures and experimentation. It was built on a lot of domain knowledge. There's tons of data engineering research that goes behind it. And LLMs, again, just like AI, has been actually around for a long time and researched because natural language has been one of the key things that they recognized AI systems need to understand. So it's been there for a very long time, researched, and that's where we are today. So I think the hype around it is a little bit exaggerated in some sense or even misleading to some extent because a lot of people seem to just jump onto the bandwagon without understanding what AI can do, what it cannot do, what is the trade-offs, what's the risk involved and how much it's going to cost, and there's a lot of aspects around it, and that's leading to an AI overload problem in my view.
What is the AI overload problem actually?
I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I was at a high school science fair, and about 75 to 80% of the projects, and this is computer science category, was all ML models. And I'm not being negative here. I am an AI optimistic, and it's good to see all the focus on ML at the school level, but I think it's a little bit of an overload. Areas like quantum computing, cybersecurity, those are equivalent fields in computer science that needs to be researched to make sure we are exploring the maximum capabilities. I think those are getting sidelined by this overload at a school level, is my observation. And I think I see a similar reflection in startups too. There isn't a day that goes by without a new startup being mentioned in the news. And with all that is happening in the future, AI startups will start to cannibalize each other to some extent because more and more of them will turn to open source. The market is going to eventually become more flooded. And this will only worsen, just like what happened with data storage. Think about how data storage cost was when we were storing megabytes or even kilobytes of data in floppy disk to having gigabytes in our smartphones today, right? Just right in our hands. So in a flooded market, as things progress, survival is going to depend on being very unique. You need to stand out, which means you need to have innovative algorithms with people who understand the domain knowledge. And you need to be producing high quality software. And I think this is where big tech companies will end up having more advantage over startups over time. And in the future, let's say in a decade or two, when you actually look back, what I'm afraid of is that we might end up having a technical debt around core engineering. So we probably will not have too many people, let's say, for example, who understand how the mechanics and physics of systems work. We need people who understand the domain knowledge. And today, what we see as success of AI is trained behind that domain knowledge as your foundation that's just making all of these successful. So I think it's important for future generation to understand and not just run behind AI as the singular or a core focus, but more look for multidisciplinary fields that intersect AI as a subcomponent to it.
It's very interesting. You also mentioned about ethical and privacy concerns around AI. I know this is something that's talked about a lot. What's your expert opinion on this?
A lot of them are big advocates of being responsible, developing systems that's ethical and so on. That's all great to see. But a big area that we are still not advocating for enough is awareness at individual user level, right? For privacy. Even for folks who work in tech, it's not very commonly understood. For example, I install an app on my phone. I'm pretty much
Mhm.
giving access to all my data to the app owner, right? My search history, my other apps, data, contacts, the list can go on long. And for people who are in cybersecurity can really understand and relate, right? And let's say, for example, I'm excited about an upcoming game or a match that's happening, and I put a lot of Instagram posts around it. Companies
Mhm.
actually could use this kind of data to set up the price of those games or matches at a higher cost, right? When I think of an individual perspective, it's not a big, it's just one person data point. But from a company's perspective, when you're talking about collectively as a society, we're now talking of an economical impact at a large scale. These are nuances that I think we're still not talking about widely or even transparently from an individual perspective. And in general, people should understand the implication of data that we expose and put at risk right from our smartphone, right from Alexa, Google now that you use in your households.
This is a very interesting topic for me. I'm talking about 2014, 15. So in Emirates Airlines, when I was in Dubai, so what they used to do is the pricing of the ticket used to actually change based on whether you're doing it from an Android phone or you're actually accessing the site from, let's say, a Mac or even an iPhone.
Yeah.
So based on the OS, they're going to do that. Having said that, of course, we have a lot of data leakages, etc. Also that happens. But do you think this is something that is specific to AI? Because the US Congress also has stopped people using the chat GPT. So is this taking it too far because these issues exist even without AI, or is it something that will probably magnify with AI?
I think that's where the role of ChatGPT comes into picture, in my view. Until ChatGPT came, people that I talked to, they would be like, machine learning, data science is it's more of a theory. ChatGPT kind of made it practical. Now people are like, oh, what you are saying as theory actually works. It is real. And I think that's where a lot of awareness has been created. The whole example with the app and your data leakage, that's been actually there for long. And I think that's where cybersecurity specialists have been highlighting and talking about. But I think it's just that awareness at a large scale is what ChatGPT brought in. So people now can relate, and that's where we see that transformation or more awareness and talking about.
Very interesting. You are also an advisor to a lot of startups. What are the perils that you see with startups trying to delve into AI?
Yeah, I think that's I could go on long about it, right? Because I talked to a lot of them, and the first and foremost should be just identifying cost of AI implementation. That's just underrated today. I was reading a few weeks back a LinkedIn post where a startup founder was saying that an engineer from Meta basically rejected their offer because they didn't have a GPU. AI infrastructure is very expensive. And for startups, it's even more expensive because they're looking for funding, they're actively sourcing money. And so I think they need to understand that fully before they start even reaching out to potential investors. Another perspective, when Meta released their language model, Llama, they said they used about 2000 GPUs or something, and they trained the model over several weeks. So these things just don't happen as fast as it appears to be. And NVIDIA's new GPU cost about like 30K or 40K, is where they pricing it at. So you can do the math and see where that ends up. So we're talking about a lot of money. And like I said earlier, that's where big tech companies will end up having a competitive advantage in the long run. On top of that, you add scalability, security. These are additional costs that you're going to have. It's easy to ignore security when you have just one or two customers, or you put it on a lower, priority or in your back burner. But you could quickly scale and you have dozens of customers. Then what happens? So companies need to start designing their systems, taking a holistic view of what are the different components. If I scale, will the same model hold true? And that's another area where things like explainable AI comes into consideration. You need to build a system that you're able to explain, right? If you cannot explain why your model or your application is doing something, you're essentially setting up a black box. And when a failure of your product occurs, or if there's a bug or anything that you want to debug, you can't really dissect a black box to identify where things are going on. And that's adding more and more cost. So I think they need to think of it as a holistic picture before they go behind just the idea or the innovation. It's more scalability and security, which comes with cost, in my view.
True. This is going to be a very controversial question, but I still will ask you because you're in this space. Mm,
Sure.
when it comes to the VCs, so they tend to follow whatever is the hottest trend. So, for example, in 2022, Web 3.0 was the hottest trend. So, all the VCs were after companies that used to use the word Web 3.0 in their pitch deck. And 23, it collapsed dramatically. So, nobody used to touch them in the barge. So, what is your advice to startups in 2024, should they actually be focusing on AI and trying to include that if that is not their core, or should they rather do something which will be more scalable and will be closer to their core?
Yeah. I think I definitely advocate for AI, right? I want more research and more advancement in that. But what people need to think about is if you have a problem, is AI the only solution that's going to solve your problem? If it is not, then you're using the wrong solution. So just because you want to bring AI into the picture, it doesn't mean that's the only thing that will solve your problem. Maybe a simple technique or a simple existing mature technology can also solve the problem that you're trying to do. So I would really start with what's my objective? What am I trying to solve? And for that particular problem, is AI the best solution? And there are a lot of advisors, experts in the field that can make that evaluation. So they need to evaluate that before saying, okay, I'm going to go behind AI. And a lot of problems today that we have, yes, AI is the best solution. But that's where, again, the cost that I mentioned comes into picture. So if I'm going to be able to solve the problem at 95% of completion with, let's say, millions of dollars, versus another solution that I'm going to at least reach, let's say, 90% with half the cost, it makes sense to go for the one with 90% and half cost. So that weighing and evaluation really needs to be done before they go in for it. Because once you go in, put all the money, you don't want to end up with a failure. So that's very important in my view.
Fantastic. I'm super glad that I asked this highly controversial question. But to add on to that, where do you see the role of AI itself going in manufacturing?
The list is big. It's transforming the industry a lot, right from taking away the need of doing repetitive tasks, operating machinery, physical work, all that has been replaced or augmented with AI. And that's driving efficiency, productivity. And when you think about factory floors, automation is key. And you want things that are robust. And that's another area where AI is really playing a big role. Supply chain enhancements, better management of your inventory, and predicting challenges in your supply demand. The biggest I see is, apart from all of this, is I think a great application is with safety. A lot of sites have risky machinery that people need to operate on. That's where AI can really bring on that impact, where you're putting human life as a priority and leveraging machines doing that job.
Makes sense. You've been a leader for a long time, and of course, Brainbox is focused around leadership. I had actually seen another study also some time back where they said about 90 to 95% of the leaders are the ones who are actually adopting AI, whereas the
Mhm.
middle management is still around 40-45%. Do you really feel that this is something that the leaders should be compelling their team also to be adopting AI, or probably the leadership is going to have to leverage AI more to be able to get the tangible action points?
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting. I mean, that's an interesting survey numbers. Now that I think of it, I don't think it's very surprising to some extent because there are many aspects to adopting AI, like we talked earlier, cost, scalability, and all of that. In my view, leadership success comes with a lot of trust. So my foremost would be to really start with upskilling and creating more awareness among your teams and employees. They need to feel confident and buy in that their jobs are not going away. That's the biggest thing that people fear of. And people tend to be afraid of things that we don't know, that we don't understand. So the best solution is more awareness and knowledge, an understanding of how AI works. And I'm not really saying that everyone needs to go and do a AI course or a degree, but a fundamental understanding of it will be very important for that adoption. And leaders need to really present AI as an ally. It shouldn't be seen as a replacement for employees or teams. And I mean, it's just like the way I think of it is it's just like how we have adopted computers. Not everyone who operates a computer has a computer science degree, right? So I think AI should be seen synonymous to that. When computers came out, everyone thought all jobs are going to go away. We don't need manual work at all anymore. But any new technology only causes a transformation of job roles. There is changes, different responsibilities that we take up. And it's just like how we have adopted computer in most fields, each field really needs to adopt it as part of their role appropriately. So presenting it in that fashion will make sure you have their buy-in. And the moment you have your organization aligned, this will make the business problem that you're trying to solve successful because your workforce is aligned. They buy in, they see confidence, and they trust that AI is not going to replace but transform. So that is probably where that disparity between executive and middle management is coming.
Makes sense. So you're also a guest speaker at universities. You're also an advisory board member in strategic AI programs. How do you see the intersection of academia and the AI or the data science industry shaping the future?
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's actually one of the very fulfilling things that I do is having that connection with academia, going back to universities and see where they are at. And like I mentioned earlier about the technical debt that I fear that might happen, I think universities really play a pivotal role in making sure that doesn't happen. Give you another example where I was talking to one of my mentees who is in one of the top CS programs here in the US. It was an eye opening to know what her biggest struggle was. It was getting a spot in one of the ML classes. There are hundreds of students who want to enroll, but because they have limited seats, it's almost like a fist fight getting into an ML class or a data science class. And they could even end up graduating without getting exposure to some of the key courses, which is considered like a foundation. So that's where a lot of multidisciplinary programs that offer core engineering or core STEM field intersected with AI so that there is like a fair distribution of talent across all degrees. And I think that's where feedback from industry can play a big role because that will ensure alignment on what the practical needs are, what is the industry behind, what are the demands of the industry, and make a match with the academic programs that they offer. So there's no disparity in the future.
Lovely. Last but certainly not the least,
Sure.
I know that you are heavily involved with women empowerment through scholarships and mentorship programs as well. So, could you share a few probably impactful moments from your work that you've had with disadvantaged women in India?
Yeah, I see most of them grow through 3 or 4 years and a lot of them even longer. Witnessing the transformation in their confidence when they get a degree and a job is really satisfying. They come in with an uncertainty that they don't know if they will get a degree from their economical challenges at home. They come in with a lot of uncertainty and fear, and witnessing the transformation and confidence is just it's very satisfying to see, and knowing that I've set them up for financial and intellectual independence is truly my most fulfilling moment. It's the joy is different there. So yeah, I think that to me is the most impactful.
The mentorship program, is it something that is happening in India, right? So, you're doing it
Yeah, yeah.
remotely?
Yeah, I do it remotely. So these are students who are in different parts of India, and yeah, remotely is how I manage all of that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nisha, for having taken the time out to come on the show.
Thank you for having me, and it was a great pleasure chatting about AI. So yeah, thank you.